Everyone noticed the thud of Maya's pencil hitting the floor, but no one expected the small, trembling sob that followed, a sound so soft it nearly disappeared beneath the morning chatter, yet sharp enough to pull the entire class into silence, including Mr. Harris, who was halfway through writing the day's lesson when he turned and saw her with her head bowed, shoulders shaking, trying to hide her tears. It was the kind of moment that would usually pass unnoticed in a busy classroom, but something about the way Maya's hands clutched the edge of her desk, as if holding herself together, made Mr. Harris step closer, his voice gentle as he asked if she wanted a moment outside. Though she couldn't give an answer, she simply shook her head, wiped her face, and whispered, "I'm sorry," as if being sad was somehow a crime. The other students exchanged glances, some confused, some concerned, but none dared to speak, watching instead as Mr. Harris slowly crouched beside her desk, lowering himself to her eye level, refusing to let her sink into the invisibility she was trying so hard to retreat into. When she finally lifted her face, her eyes were red and tired in a way no 9-year-olds ever should be, and something in that expression made him pause, made him see that this wasn't about a pencil or a bad morning. This was a child carrying a weight far too heavy for her small frame. "Maya," he said softly, "you don't have to tell me what's wrong, but I want you to know you're safe here." The words cracked something inside her, and before she could stop herself, the tears came again, this time spilling freely, her breath shaking as she tried and failed to pull herself together while the class watched silently. In that moment, Mr. Harris did something no one expected. He stood, walked to the front of the room, and gently announced that today's lesson was changing, that sometimes the most important things weren't written on the board but written on someone's heart, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. The children blinked, unsure of what he meant, until he returned to Maya with a soft smile and placed a small, hand-painted stone on her desk. A smooth turquoise pebble with the word "brave" etched into it told her it had belonged to his mother, who carried it on her hardest days. And now, only if she wanted, she could keep it for today, just until her heart felt lighter. The class watched as Maya's fingers curled around the stone, her breathing slowly evening out, her shoulders relaxing just enough to show that the storm inside her had found a place to rest. No one moved, no one spoke, but something in that room shifted, a quiet understanding blooming as Mr. Harris told the whole class that everyone, no matter how young, sometimes wakes up with heavy mornings, and that kindness wasn't just something they talked about, it was something they practiced. The children nodded, some of them glancing at Maya with newfound gentleness, others looking down as if realizing they, too, had carried their own unspoken storms. For the rest of the lesson, the room felt different, not louder, not quieter, but warmer, as if an invisible thread had woven all their small hearts a little closer together. Maya didn't say much for the rest of the morning, but she held the stone the entire time, and Mr. Harris noticed the way her fingers clung to it like an anchor. He had no idea none of them did that. This small act, this tiny ripple of kindness, would soon become a story that reached far beyond the walls of their classroom, touching millions who saw in it a reminder of the gentleness the world often forgets. And before we move on, if you're feeling the warmth of this story already, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. To Threads of Kindness, your support helps these stories of love and humanity reach more hearts every day. Asterisk. After the morning's unusual pause in lessons, the classroom slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere had subtly changed, like the quiet after a storm, where everything feels sharper, more fragile, and somehow more important. Maya sat at her desk, the turquoise stone resting against her palm, a small anchor in a day that had already felt too heavy. Mr. Harris moved around the room, checking on each student, but every so often his gaze drifted back to her, a silent reminder that she wasn't invisible, that she didn't have to carry her worries alone. During recess, instead of joining the laughter and games, Maya slipped to the far edge of the playground, hugging her knees to her chest, trying to disappear behind the slide where no one could see her. But it wasn't long before Mr. Harris appeared, crouched beside her, and asked softly, "Would you like to talk?" Her eyes brimmed with tears again, and she shook her head, whispering, "I don't want anyone to know." And yet, there was something in his calm patience that made her words feel safe, and slowly, hesitantly, she began to speak, not about school, not about friends, but about home. About the mornings when her mother left before the sun rose and her father didn't answer calls, about the nights when hunger and worry kept her awake, about the loneliness that felt so big it could swallow her whole. Mr. Harris listened, truly listened, nodding gently, never interrupting, never rushing. When she stopped, exhausted by her own confession, he said nothing for a long moment, simply letting the silence speak. Then he leaned closer and said, "Maya, I can't fix everything outside this classroom, but I can promise you this: you will not face your storms alone here. It was the first time she had felt anyone offer her more than sympathy. It was an offer of partnership, of presence, of human solidarity. Something shifted inside her, a fragile thread of trust beginning to stitch itself where fear and loneliness had been. By the end of recess, Maya was walking back into the classroom with a little more courage, and the students who had been watching her, some from curiosity, some from concern, now looked at her with a quiet respect. Mr. Harris had modeled something far more powerful than a lesson in math or grammar. He had demonstrated that noticing someone's pain and responding with kindness could transform a day, even a life. The rest of the day passed in an almost dreamlike state for Maya. Even routine lesson spelling, fractions, reading comprehension felt softer somehow, infused with the warmth of the morning's unexpected empathy. The turquoise stone stayed in her hand, grounding her, reminding her that small gestures could hold immense power. During art class, she painted cautiously at first, letting colors mix slowly on her paper, watching as shapes began to emerge like memories she could finally contain instead of letting them spill uncontrolled. Mr. Harris wandered the room, offering a word here, a gentle encouragement there, but never hovering, allowing each child the space to create, to express, to heal. When the final bell rang, Maya packed her bag slowly, not wanting to leave the protective bubble the day had created. Mr. Harris waited by the door, giving her a nod and a smile that said more than words could, and when she left, the weight on her small shoulders felt slightly lighter. That evening, as she sat at the kitchen table with the turquoise stone beside her dinner plate, she thought about the power of attention, the extraordinary kindness of someone willing to pause and simply care. And even though her home life hadn't changed, even though tomorrow might bring the same challenges, she knew something vital had shifted inside her, the understanding that someone could see her, that someone could hold space for her pain, and that maybe, just maybe, she could begin to do the same for herself. The story of that day, unknown to anyone else, was quietly forming the foundation of a resilience that would carry her further than she realized. And the ripple was already beginning through whispered retellings among students, through the lingering image of a teacher who refused to ignore tears, through the silent gratitude of a child who finally felt seen. If this chapter has touched your heart, remember to like this video and subscribe to Threads of Kindness so we can continue sharing the stories that remind the world how small gestures can change lives. The following week, the memory of that morning lingered like a quiet hum in the classroom. Maya walked in with the turquoise stone tucked safely in her pocket, a small talisman of courage, while the other students exchanged whispers, their curiosity barely masked by the usual shuffle of backpacks and chairs. Mr. Harris noticed the change immediately, not dramatic, but subtle. Maya held her head a little higher, her hands less fidgety, and there was a spark in her eyes, the fragile glimmer of a child beginning to feel seen. He knew, however, that one moment of kindness, though powerful, could not erase weeks or months of struggle, so he began planning something that would extend the lesson of compassion far beyond the walls of his classroom. That afternoon, after the students had left and the halls echoed with the fading sounds of laughter and chatter, he stayed behind, collecting supplies, sticky notes, colored markers, and a large sheet of paper. The plan was simple but daring. He wanted the students to express gratitude, kindness, and support for one another, but anonymously, so that even the quietest or most withdrawn child could participate without fear. The next morning he introduced the activity with a gentle tone, explaining that everyone carries unseen struggles, and sometimes, the smallest gestures, a word, a note, a smile can make a world of difference. The class was hesitant at first. Some students exchanged skeptical glances, unsure how words on paper could matter, while others whispered excitedly about leaving notes for friends. Maya's fingers brushed a turquoise stone in her pocket as she reached for a marker, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and nerves. She didn't know who would receive her note, but the act itself felt liberating. Slowly, the classroom transformed into a small hive of quiet energy. Notes began to appear on desks, tucked under books, and even left on chairs. Words like "you are brave," "I believe in you," and "you matter" started surfacing in unexpected places, each message a thread connecting one heart to another. Maya found a note on her desk that simply read, "You are stronger than you think." Her eyes welled with tears, and she clutched her stone tightly. Realizing that the gesture she had experienced herself had now come full circle, she was both receiver and giver of kindness. Mr. Harris watched from his desk, his heart swelling, knowing that this small classroom exercise had done more than teach empathy. It had created a safe space where children could acknowledge pain, hope, and courage without judgment. But the most extraordinary moment came when the principal, passing by for her weekly visit, noticed the activity. She asked to take photos of the notes and, with Mr. Harris's permission, posted them on the school's social media page, highlighting the importance of kindness and education. Within hours, the post went viral. Comments flooded in from parents, teachers, and strangers, all marveling at how a simple act, a teacher noticing a child crying, a pebble, and a classroom activity had created such an incredible ripple. Messages poured in from people who had been inspired to perform their own acts of kindness, from strangers reaching out to students, to educators sharing similar stories from their schools. Maya, unaware of the online attention, sat quietly at her desk, still holding her stone. But now her smile was gentler, more assured. She felt seen, validated, and empowered in a way she had never experienced before. For the first time in months, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter, not gone, but shared, distributed across a network of care she hadn't realized existed. Mr. Harris, standing at the front of the room, watched the transformation silently. The shy smiles, the small gestures between classmates, the way children who had previously ignored each other were now exchanging words of encouragement, all of it was proof that noticing someone's pain and responding with empathy could create a chain reaction far stronger than any textbook lesson. And though Maya and her classmates couldn't yet comprehend the magnitude of what was unfolding online, they had become part of a story bigger than themselves. A story that would remind thousands of people that humanity thrives on connection and compassion. That evening, when Maya returned home, she placed her turquoise stone beside her notebook and wrote her first note for the classroom project. Even small hearts can hold immense courage. She smiled softly, knowing that the pebble on her desk was no longer just a piece of stone. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary power of one teacher's simple act of noticing a child in need. By the time Friday arrived, the story of Maya's tears and Mr. Harris's kindness had grown beyond the confines of their school walls. The viral post had caught the attention of local news outlets, bloggers, and even education advocates, all sharing the story with headlines emphasizing the power of empathy in classrooms. Yet, inside the school, life continued with a quiet but profound shift. Students who had once competed for attention now paused to notice one another. Small acts of kindness, sharing pencils, helping with tricky math problems, offering a comforting word became the norm rather than the exception. Maya, once reserved and anxious, had emerged as an unexpectedly courageous presence. She began leaving little notes on classmates' desks, inspired by the exercise, each word carefully chosen. "You are not alone. I see your strength. Keep going, you matter." She never knew who would find them, but the act itself brought her a sense of purpose she had never known before. Mr. Harris watched from a distance, quietly proud, realizing that the pebble and the classroom activity had ignited something far greater than he could have imagined. One day during lunch break, Maya approached him, holding the turquoise stone tightly in her small hand. "Mr. Harris," she whispered, eyes shining, "thank you for noticing me. I didn't think anyone ever would." Her voice trembled, and he knelt beside her again, smiling softly. "Maya," he said, "sometimes people do notice, and sometimes it takes just one person to remind us that we matter. Today you're reminding others." The ripple continued outside the school. Parents, touched by the story, began sharing their own experiences of small gestures that made a difference in their children's lives. Teachers across the city started similar kindness exercises in their classrooms. Inspired by the simplicity and impact of Mr. Harris's approach, messages poured in from strangers who had read about the story online, telling how it encouraged them to reach out to friends, family, and even strangers with empathy. Some shed tears of their own, others sent words of hope. The most astonishing part for Mr. Harris and Maya came one Monday morning, when a local journalist visited the school with a camera crew. They wanted to meet the child who had sparked a nationwide wave of kindness. Maya was nervous at first, shrinking into her seat as the camera focused on her. But Mr. Harris gently reminded her, "You are brave. Remember the stone." She held the turquoise pebble in her palm, and when the reporter asked her how it felt to be part of something so special, she smiled softly and said, "I just wanted someone to notice me, and now maybe I'm helping others feel noticed too." The reporter's eyes misted, and the footage later aired on television, reaching countless homes. Comments flooded social media again, parents encouraging their children to show empathy, teachers sharing their own stories, and strangers reflecting on the simple yet transformative act of paying attention to someone in pain. At school though, Maya remained the same child in many ways. She still laughed at silly jokes, still got frustrated with math problems, still hugged her friends when needed, but now, there was a quiet confidence in her demeanor, a resilience that had been nurtured by the awareness that someone genuinely cared. Mr. Harris knew this was the moment when teaching transcended the classroom. It was no longer about lessons on the board or tests on paper. It was about teaching humanity, and the results were astonishing. Even the other students, who had only observed Maya's transformation, had begun to understand the power of empathy and the simple act of noticing someone's struggle. By the end of the week, the school principal called a small assembly, praising Mr. Harris and his class for creating a culture of kindness and reminding everyone that small actions like offering a word, a note, or simply listening could change lives. Maya, holding the turquoise stone once again, felt a swelling pride, not for herself, but for the connections that had formed. The awareness that one person's care could spread like a ripple across hearts and communities. That evening, as she placed the stone beside her bed, she reflected on the past week, the tears, the stone, the notes, the viral story, and realized that something inside her had changed forever. A small act of kindness had become a legacy, not just for her, but for everyone who witnessed it, participated in it, or shared it with the world. And if this story has moved you even a little, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Threads of Kindness, or we can continue bringing you stories that show the world how small acts can create extraordinary ripples of hope. The weeks that followed cemented the transformation in the classroom, and in many ways in Maya's life. The turquoise stone remained on her desk, a small talisman of courage, but its significance had deepened. It was no longer just a reminder of Mr. Harris's kindness, it was a symbol of her own ability to heal, to notice, and to give hope. Each morning, as she walked into the classroom, she carried not only her books but a growing confidence, a quiet understanding that her feelings mattered, and that small acts of empathy could ripple far beyond what she could see. Mr. Harris continued to nurture this environment. He never made the mistake of thinking that one gesture alone could suffice. Instead, he wove acts of kindness into the very fabric of their daily routine. The students wrote notes, complimented each other's efforts, shared lunches, and helped those struggling with lessons or feelings. The classroom became a sanctuary, a place where attention, care, and understanding weren't optional, they were expected, natural, vital. But the impact went far beyond the walls of the school. The viral story continued to spread, reaching people across the country and even abroad. Teachers sent letters of gratitude, sharing how they had implemented similar exercises. Parents called to thank the school for inspiring their children to be more compassionate. Strangers shared stories of noticing the lonely, reaching out to those who were suffering silently, and performing acts of kindness they might have otherwise overlooked. And yet, amid the widespread recognition, Maya remained modest, almost shy. She never sought attention, never boasted about her notes or her courage. Instead, she focused on the simple acts that made a difference in the lives of those around her. She had learned that heroism didn't require headlines, it required heart. One rainy afternoon during free reading time, Maya felt a familiar tear prick her eye, not sadness, but a swelling of emotion. The recognition that her life had changed in ways she never imagined. She looked around the room, children quietly helping one another, a few passing notes of encouragement, laughter mingling with soft whispers of comfort. She held her turquoise stone in her hand and realized the truth. The world could be cruel, heavy, and lonely, but even the smallest gestures of care could carve out light in the darkness. At that moment, she approached Mr. Harris, who was grading papers, and handed him a folded note. He unfolded it slowly, reading the simple words in Maya's careful handwriting. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for teaching me to see others." His eyes welled up, and for the first time, Maya saw him truly emotional, not just as a teacher, but as a human being profoundly moved by the connection they had formed. "You've taught me too, Maya," he said quietly, "more than I can ever put into words." The bell rang, signaling the end of the day, but the impact of those words, of that gesture, resonated long after. The story of the child who cried in class and the teacher who responded with unwavering compassion had become a beacon, inspiring countless others to notice, to pause, and to act with kindness. For Maya, it was more than a story, it was a life lesson she would carry forever. She understood now that tears were not a sign of weakness, that vulnerability could be a bridge rather than a barrier, and that one person's attention could alter the course of another's life in ways unimaginable. And though she was still a child, she had learned an adult truth, that empathy and courage, combined with a simple act of noticing, could create ripples that changed the world. As she packed her bag that evening, the turquoise stone in her hand, Maya felt a quiet pride and a new sense of responsibility. The world was vast, full of struggles unseen, but she had the power to notice, to act, and to be the kindness someone else needed. Mr. Harris walked her to the door, pausing to place a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Remember," he said softly, "even the smallest light can push back darkness." Maya smiled, nodding, feeling the weight of those words in her heart. And that small, transformative lesson, the lesson of being seen, of showing up, of caring deeply, would last a lifetime. If this story has inspired you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Threads of Kindness, so together we can continue to share the stories that remind the world how extraordinary simple acts of love and empathy can be.